Hey everybody, Dave here. Want to remind you that Tales from the Backlog is listener supported over on patreon.com by cool people such as Chris Nelson and new patrons Chris Copleen, Stylish Moonborn, Adam Bucheri, and Zulgeek. You can be like them and head on over to patreon.com/realdavejackson and you will be a hero just like them. All right, let's get to the show. Hey everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and this is Tales from the Backlog, a video games podcast where I bring in guests to talk about a game that we played. My guest today is a good friend of the show, first-time spacefarer and host of the Main Quest podcast. Keith Gasper is back. Welcome back, Keith.
Thanks for inviting me back on, my second time, and yeah, I am a spacefarer, right? I'm flying deep into your black hole.
For people who have been following the show, Keith was a guest on the Earthbound episode, which is a really fun episode of the show. Highly recommend you go check that one out if you haven't listened already. And before we get into today's game, Keith, I want to give you a chance at the beginning to talk about what the Main Quest is all about.
So the Main Quest podcast is a podcast dedicated to me playing all of my childhood games. From very early childhood to, I don't know, maybe about early adulthood, replaying all of those and trying to basically decide if they still hold up or not. Surprisingly, very early on, most of them don't, but they're getting better.
As the games get newer, yeah.
Very, very slowly they're getting newer. I think I'm like firmly in like 1991 right about now, so...
Yeah, and it's so like the show's been going on for a while and you're just now getting out of the the NES. Like I remember one of the more recent episodes at the time of recording that was released was you saying goodbye to all the NES games on the show. So this is something I said in the Earthbound episode, but it's something I really appreciate about your show, and it's not just like I want to talk about all of my favorite games from when I was growing up. It's everything that you can remember playing and or owning, right?
Yeah. There's not a stone left unturned, unfortunately. And, some of it's, obviously I couldn't buy video games when I was 5 years old. I have an older brother. So a lot of the stuff that was just in the house was just in the house. And it would be easy for me to say that my brother had absolutely horrible taste in video games. But back in those days, like, you just didn't know what you were going to get. So it's only partly his fault.
Yeah, like when I think about the games that I played when I was a little kid, it's a random ass grab bag of stuff. Like I'm so much more selective now because I can be, but you're right. Back then it was like, oh, this game has a cool like box art, so I'll rent this game and play it or something like that. Like I wasn't reading reviews when I was 10 years old.
Right. Yeah. If you do go into my podcast, go into it knowing that it's not a nostalgia fest. I'm not gushing about the games. Some of them I am, some of them not, but it's a very kind of like methodical picking apart and breaking down stuff. And if you listen to the Earthbound episode, I do go into a lot of detail about the history of the game if it's out there, so that's always taken into consideration. But just because a video game's a classic doesn't mean it's worth playing.
Yep. And I wholeheartedly appreciate that as somebody who we'll say struggles to enjoy retro games from time to time. But I really enjoy listening to the main quest. And again, one of my favorite things is just like you will bring up a game on the show and you're like, I remember playing this. No one does podcasts about this random ass game anymore. I remember playing it, so I'm going to do a podcast. Turns out this game fucking sucks. And then those podcasts are super entertaining because I get to hear, it's fun to hear you when you talk about a game that sucks. And I get to learn about a lot of games I've never heard of. And you do go into the history and stuff like that. And I enjoy listening to that stuff too. I don't do history and history research on this podcast very often. So I enjoy listening to someone who actually does do that stuff. So I recommend that everybody checks out the Main Quest podcast. If you want kind of an idea on like what that show is like, our Earthbound episode is kind of like that, like you said. But yeah, just go check it out. You'll find something on there. The Main Quest podcast is also not just retro games. From time to time, you do cover current games on there too. So for people like me who are not trawling through the NES.
Yeah, if you want my, I don't know when this is going to air, actually, but Dave was actually on to talk about Bloodborne. So if you ever need to hear Dave talk about Bloodborne for the 50th time, you can hear him and I talk about it for 3 hours. So
yep. If 6 hours of me talking about Bloodborne on this podcast feed was not enough for you, there's 3 more hours over on the Main Quest feed. Yeah. So everyone go check that out. Today, Keith and I are going to be talking about Outer Wilds. And I'm going to do my best to not say the Outer Wilds, because that's not what it is. Outer Wilds, a first-person exploration game developed by Mobius Digital, published by Annapurna Interactive in 2019. And I'm also going to do my best to say Mobius, and not add a random R in that word somewhere today. So
you don't want to morb out?
It's Mobin time.
Morbin time? Mobin?
When this episode airs, the Morbius memes are going to be horribly out of date.
I'm sorry, I just dated your podcast.
Well, that's what happens with podcasts. They all get dated at some point. So, if you need an elevator pitch for Outer Wilds, you're not sure what it is a first-person kind of narrative discovery game. Set inside of a time loop, set inside of a working, functioning mini solar system simulator. There you go. There's a lot going on.
I'm just laughing because I'm like, what are spoilers at this point? Because I feel like you just spoiled a lot of the game just now.
Okay, so this is a good time to talk about spoilers. All right, so the reason I am not going to be coy about the fact that this is a time loop game is if you go on Steam and look at the description, it's in the description.
Oh, really?
Game. They wrote that there.
That's fucked.
So, I mean, I heard this was a time loop like the second I heard about the game. So, spoiler policy for the episode is beyond what we just said. First of all, this is one of those games that people say like, go into it with no knowledge of the game whatsoever. I disagree with that, but
really,
I may be the only person. Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah, you might be the only person.
I would like to know like how a game plays before I play it. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of this podcast. So, I mean, if you want to take everyone else's advice, if you want to side with Keith here, who obviously believes that, then hit pause on this podcast, go play Outer Wilds. It's available. It's on the like PS Plus service. If you're signed up for that, it might be on Game Pass. It's also not an expensive game to begin with. Go play it and come back. That's another beauty of podcasts. We will be here when you're ready.
This is definitely one of those situations where on my podcast, I will give a spoiler warning, but I will not care about talking about it. And this is one of those situations where I'm like, well, if you're going to listen to a podcast about the Outer Wilds, you better have played the Outer Wilds.
So I don't know. I only partially agree with that. I think that we can have a good conversation about what it's like to play this game, what's good about this game, without spoiling the story, which is what we're going to do. So we're going to save, when we get into the story part of the like non-spoiler part of this episode, it's going to be like 30 seconds long, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. Everything else, though, like how it feels to play this game, what the gameplay is like, I think that's fair game. So
yeah.
So we're going to be very, very sensitive to spoilers about story, because that's like the whole point of this game, is discovering the story. Everything else, though, normal Tales from the Backlog policy as far as spoilers go. So getting into our histories with Outer Wilds and what made us want to play this. Keith, the guest, always goes first. Can you remember what was it that made you want to play Outer Wilds, and kind of your brief history with the game along the way?
I just bought it. That's kind
Sight
of it.
unseen.
I mean, if you want me to elaborate, I guess so. I was vaguely aware of Outer Wilds around the same time that this was announced. Outer Worlds was also announced, which that had my attention because it was developed by Obsidian, who did Fallout New Vegas and had done the first couple of Fallouts. So that was on my radar. I had no idea what Outer Wilds was, even up to and including to when I purchased it. And in hindsight, I did buy Outer Worlds, and I kind of wish I hadn't, because that game it's fine. It's like the most okayest game ever made. And so I saw Outer Wilds on the eShop or on the PlayStation storefront, and I was like, well, here's the other Outer game that I heard about. Like, I know it exists, so I guess I'm just going to buy it. And then I didn't play it for a while. It wasn't until like 2021. It was January of 2021 when I finally did play it. So that's pretty much my brief history of it. It was literally just like, well, I guess I'll just buy that other game.
Fair enough. So when this game was released, I wasn't really paying attention to it. I had never heard of it. Like, I really got back into gaming in like 2019. So I was doing a lot of catch up on a bunch of stuff I missed. Like, I was playing like The Witcher and, stuff like that during that time. So I really wasn't paying attention to like what new games were coming out, and definitely not like what new indie games were coming out. It was like I'm playing The Witcher for a long ass time, and I'm playing like Nier Automata and stuff like that. So then like Game of the Year time starts to roll around, and people are like, Game of the Year is Outer Wilds. It's not close. This is one of the best games we've ever played. And there were so many people saying stuff like that, people I really respect. So I was like, oh shit, let me get that. So I bought it, started playing it, had a pretty good time for a little while, and then I got super frustrated with it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I put it down, and I put it into that category of like games I like what they're doing, but games I don't like playing. So I'm not going to play the whole thing. So then I came back to it again, like this year, 2022, because there was like this nagging thing at me, like, you got really frustrated. Maybe you can get past that part that was frustrating to you. And it turns out like the part that was really frustrating, I had zero issues with when I replayed it this year. So maybe I was just being a, little smooth brained there. I'm not sure. So that's my little history with it. I got frustrated with it at the beginning, put it down, took a couple years off, came back, really enjoyed it. The game took me about 20 hours to play. Does that sound right to you, Keith?
Oh, man. Are you talking about... I've played the game 3 times, so...
Okay. So...
my first playthrough...
yeah.
I would say maybe like upwards of like 50 hours.
Oh, a lot of time exploring then.
So I didn't use a guide.
Right.
It was just a game that I was playing in my free time. I had never even expected to even cover the game or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just something that I was playing in my free time and just playing leisurely. So it was up there. And then my second playthrough was just trying to see how fast I could beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had forgotten a lot of things. It had been a couple months. So I would say it was like 10 hours my second playthrough. And then for the playthrough for the show, plus I played the DLC, was probably like 20 hours. Because I did never play the DLC, so the DLC was like a good chunk of that also. So
that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up. So this episode is not going to be covering Echoes of the Eye because I didn't play that yet. Number one, because I was just not.
Well, let me just delete all these notes.
I didn't play the DLC yet because I was like not in the mood for more of this quite yet. And most importantly, people told me it's really scary, and that just kind of puts me off a little bit. So I did not play that. It's on my wish list, and if it seems like it's meaty, like almost as meaty as like the main game, maybe a little bit smaller, but it's not like a 2-hour thing, right?
If you know exactly what you're doing, you could probably finish it faster than the vanilla game.
Right.
In the vanilla game, you could probably finish like in 40 minutes if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, I didn't play Echoes of the Eye. I figured if I do play that later down the line, I'll do a whole episode about that. But I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, we won't be talking about that on the episode.
Well, fuck, man. It's really fucking good. I thought,
yeah, that's what I heard.
I mean, I might bring it up. I'll try not to spoil anything for you.
Yeah.
If it comes up in conversation, it comes up, but I'll keep it vague.
Okay. All right. Cool. And to get into some kind of opening thoughts about Outer Wilds, this is one of the more like kind of rewarding exploration games that I've played in a long time. The point of the game is to explore and find out what's going on. And I think the answers that you get and the story that unfolds is really, really rewarding. Like I said, it's fun to learn. It's fun to read, right? I had a good time making all these discoveries and piecing together what was going on in the world. The gameplay itself can be frustrating at times. I didn't have frustrations with the things that a lot of people complain about, though, with the game, which we'll get into. And then I have to say this out front, and we'll definitely get into it in the spoilers section, but there was a section at the end of the game that was so incredibly frustrating that it almost tanked my entire opinion of the game itself. But it was not like so bad that I was like, nope, this game sucks. This invalidates all the, 18 hours before this. It wasn't like that, but it's like, I don't know, watching Game of Thrones or something where like the ending of it is so frustrating that it kind of colors how you look at the parts that came before it. The story stuff at the end of the game is really good, but the gameplay was so frustrating that I like, when we get to it in the spoilers section, my blood pressure is going to rise thinking about this. But so I do have to say that out front, but I still do recommend playing it. People, you may not have as much trouble with that section as I did. Yeah, I don't know. Keith, what do you think?
Well, it was my game of the year last year. I'm somebody who loves puzzle games. This is a pure like adventure puzzle game. And the way I'm trying not to like spoil things. The way the story is so woven and interconnected with so many of the gameplay mechanics, and it's kind of like weird to hear you say how frustrating some of the mechanics were, because I feel like that is a very crucial part of the game, because just like in real life, the universe is a very hostile and indifferent beast. Mm-hmm. It's a force of nature, like,
yeah,
at its best, you know.
Yeah, to be clear, that was not what frustrated me, but I'll get into that in a little bit.
And so having this entire solar system as your playground, each of these planets are its own little puzzle box. And it seems it's such a small game, right? Mm-hmm. It is such a small game, but when you actually like think about each location and the things on it, the way they created this like incredible sense of scale, it's unlike any other puzzle game I've ever played before. And it also really, it's really something that feels specifically targeted towards me, because I wouldn't claim to be like an astrophysicist or something like that or anything like that, but okay, I'm totally good. Like into like space and science and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I know at some point, and I don't know like what part of the development team this was, but I know they had somebody who did work in, who was like an astrophysicist or something like that, or who had some degree at some point, who actually helped design a lot of the mechanics in the game. I mean, it's not something that I could entirely explain, but it's nothing that's so like out of this world, hard to understand or anything like that. The mechanics and the physics in the game, they make sense. Mm-hmm. Whether or not things go your way, that's, I guess there's a lot of RNG things that could possibly happen to you. I'm sure my experience is different from yours, and both of ours is going to differ from somebody else's. There are things that happened in this game that happened to me that will probably never happen to somebody else. Mm-hmm. You got to be the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, whichever one. But I really think this game, mechanically and story wise, which I don't want to touch on, not right now, it's really honestly like a masterclass in game design. It really is. Everything is married together so well. And I know you didn't play Echoes of the Eye, but there's some story things in that I can't really, it seems a little forced. It's like, oh, so here's some stuff for the people in the back that didn't quite get it.
Okay.
Which is fine. But, yeah, as a whole, I mean, yeah, it's a phenomenal game. I love it.
It's a marvel. And like the first part of that is, I think, that solar system that you touched on. So this is a good point to get into like what Outer Wilds is actually like to play. The main thing that I think is just incredible about Outer Wilds is the setting and this kind of solar system that they built. So like Keith said, this solar system is a working physics-based simulation. There is gravity, that like different planets and the sun have different like, strengths of gravity. Things have orbits that they fly in. You are affected by the gravity of whatever you're standing on and the things that are passing by. Like, for example, if you're standing on something that passes nearby the sun's incredible gravity will pull you off of the surface of the planet. And it's all based on this physics system in the game. And all of these things are working on a timer, as this is a time loop game. So, like, this is just, I mean, this by itself would be incredible. But like you said, the story and things and events that happen in the game are tied into this system. And I read that this game was like it was like a master's degree thesis by the kind of the main guy at the center of the game's development to create, like, it was like a creative video game project, basically, that then people saw it and they were like, oh, this is incredible. And then, people got involved to want to make it bigger, make it a real game and stuff like that. But this solar system is really like the heart of what makes this game really just a marvel, like I said.
Yeah, I actually didn't know. I don't know a lot about the development. I think NoClip did a documentary on it or something like that, right? I didn't watch that. I didn't do my homework.
It's it's really good. Another recommendation for a no-clip documentary.
Yeah, so that actually totally makes sense that this would be like some sort of thesis for this, for the director. Do you know his name off the top of your head?
I don't know.
Oh shit. Bad podcasters. So like you said, everything is on a timer, right?
Right.
And every planet, there's 5 planets and like one, I guess, like satellite. Is what they would typically call it. But it's a comet, essentially.
Right.
But all of these things, all of these objects are doing different things as planets do. And you even have one planet that is drastically changing throughout the time loop. And you do have about 22 minutes before the loop ends.
Right.
So within those 22 minutes, so many things can happen on these planets while you're not even on them. You could be on the other end of the solar system, while on the other end, there's stuff happening. And you can go there and go check it out.
Yeah.
But then by the end of that loop, if you go to that planet that you ended the loop on, the planet could be completely different.
Right. And that's like the next layer of like what is cool about this is that all the planets have their own kind of special, thing that's happening on the planet. And like you said, that's happening whether you're there or not. So let's say, I don't even want to get into it. This is the fun of discovering like what it is. But let's say like you discover some kind of state change on a planet throughout the time loop. That's happening whether you're there or not. So if you go there at the beginning at the time loop or at the end, that thing is progressing. And so that's kind of part of like the puzzle of like, figuring out like I need to go to this spot, but late in the loop it's inaccessible and you need to learn, all of that stuff basically. And that's part of the fun of like discovering this solar system.
And like you said, they all have their own orbits. They all have their own gravity. There's a gas giant that you can visit, and you can barely do anything. You can barely move because the gravity is so heavy there. Meanwhile, there's some planets that you can go on, and if you're just walking around, you could literally just fly off the planet because there's like no gravity on it. So
yeah,
it's completely different depending on where you are.
And like flying off the planet kind of gets me into like the other part. And you brought this up in the intro too. The other part that's great about this setting is that this is a super dangerous solar system. Like this is a game where you're discovering the story of something, but it's also a game where like this is not, a cute, spacey, like have fun in space type of game. Like you're going to die all the time in various ways that make you feel like space is a dangerous place, which like if you just look at the art style of this game, you might think it's like this, really cute, just, go out there and have fun, Mr. Astronaut, like that. But it's not really. It's more like go out there and fly. Spacefaring is fun. Learning is fun, but you're going to die all the time because space is dangerous. So like you'll run out of air. Your autopilot will fly you into the sun, like directly into it. Gravity will pull you off the planet's surface and you'll be stranded out in space. That'll happen sometimes. It's a really dangerous place to be, which is kind of how it should be because space is like the most dangerous place to be. We've all seen Apollo 13 and stuff like that. Ooh, that's a dated movie at this point. Anyway, you get the point. Space is dangerous in this game.
The other thing with the design of the planets and the mechanics and also the actual science that they put behind these mechanics, the thing that marries it all together so well is just that it's like this organic sci-fi feel where, like, if you watch Star Wars, there's all these different planets with all these different attributes to them and environments and stuff like that, right? So you got like a huge swamp planet or something. You got the sand planet and stuff like that. Yeah. That's kind of what Outer Wilds is, but with the caveat of they've done the work. They did the math to kind of figure out what one of those planets might actually be like. Mm-hmm. So the gas giant that I mentioned earlier is super chaotic. They did the math to figure out what that's going to be like physics wise, which is astonishing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I want to go back to your point about space being dangerous. Something about space also terrifies me. Mm-hmm. There's something about, when you're with your friends or whatever and you're sitting around a campfire, kind of like in Dark Souls. All right, there we go. We can count it. We got it out of the way.
Okay, we're done now.
Okay. You're sitting around a campfire or something and you're in like the middle of the woods and you look at the stars, and when you're in the middle of nowhere, you can see everything.
Yeah.
And then you just get this existential feeling of like, there's no way we're the only ones out here, you know? And that's kind of a humbling feeling, but it's also very frightening because it's one of those situations that you're just like, is there somebody else staring back? And you very much, at least I very much felt like that in Outer Wilds, especially if you are trapped in the middle of space. If you lose your ship and you get flung off somewhere with no way back, that is horrifying.
Yeah.
And there are also some very intentionally horrifying things in this game as well, which we'll have to talk about in the spoiler section. Mm-hmm. I would say that Outer Wilds is like the most like horrific non-horror game I've ever played.
Yeah, there were some real like tight butthole moments for sure, like 100%. And me as someone who really does not like horror, this game got a little bit spooky sometimes. And so like when I said I didn't play Echoes of the Eye yet because I heard it's scary, I know what that means, like what that could mean based on the first game. And it's like, oh, that will actually be pretty spooky. So another thing I really like about this game is kind of that. So space is super dangerous, right? But this game also has this kind of rustic, like camping and outdoorsy theme to like the setting and the people who, or not people, the characters who live on your home planet. And
the Hearthians.
Yeah. It's a really interesting mix of like, it's a very cozy game at points. And then it's also like, you're going to die in a bunch of horrible ways out in space. But also, when you wake up from dying, you can just go sit down and roast a marshmallow and take a nap by the campfire and talk to your buddy right there. And so it's this this is an interesting like mix of like tones sometimes. And I kind of think like this is clearly an indie game because if a AAA studio were to make a game with a functioning solar system like this would get like focus tested out because people would be like, I don't like camping. And in this game, it's very clearly like the guy who designed it at the very beginning, he likes backpacking. And so it's a big part of this game. And it's just something I really love about indie games sometimes, where it's like just much more human than a AAA game would feel sometimes. Just thinking about this game in particular, if you want to make a game about spacefaring and the dangers of space and learning about some story, but also sit down and roast a marshmallow. It's very heartfelt in that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the coziness of the game because the home planet that you start out on, it is very woodsy. It's very Earth-like. There's almost seems like it's just like kind of like a ton of like oaks and redwoods and stuff like that. It's just covered in trees. And your spaceship is also mostly made of wood. And so there are those moments where I was talking about where you can be in some very frightening or dangerous situations. And there was a lot of times where I was in my ship and I was in a bad situation, but I would leave the cockpit and just walk around the ship because it is so familiar. It feels like home. That ship is kind of cozy. So, and it all has to do with the aesthetics of it coming from, I'm blanking on the planet's name right now.
Timber-Hearth.
Timber-Hearth, thank you. The ship very much just is, it's made of wood and it comes from that planet. And so there's some familiarity when you're flying straight into the sun without any control.
Yeah. So this is a good time to get into the extremely brief kind of story setup. You are from this planet called Timber-Hearth. You wake up, you're a character that you're not human in this game. This game is populated by non-humans. You wake up, you are the newest astronaut in your kind of little home society there. It's your turn to get out there into space and explore. And this is something that like people are very proud of. Everyone's like, are you ready for your first space flight? Like it's like very small town vibes. Everyone knows that you're about to go out on your first flight. And that is all the story I'm going to give. You go out into the world and you don't know what your objective is until you get out there and start learning. You'll get out there, kind of talk to some people, uncover some clues about what's going on. And I'll stop giving details there, but I do think this game does a great job of like letting you find pieces in the order that you find them naturally, because this is an open world game. You can go anywhere in the world you want. They will give you some like pushes out in a direction to go like say, hey, maybe, there's a signal coming from here. Maybe follow that signal, see what's there. But that's all the direction you're really going to get for a while. And then
if that,
you will find some clues. And if this game works for you, those clues will spark you on like lots of different paths to go explore more and learn more. And the point I'm getting to is that what you find there is either a satisfying little story nugget or a piece to explore somewhere else. And those were always satisfying. And then the way that the story kind of takes shape as you play and then wraps up at the end, I think is like very, very good. I really love the way that storytelling is handled in this game, and I like what the story actually is. So that's all I will say, but I think this is great.
Yeah, they really just, you do your little thing on Timber-Hearth when you start out, and they literally are just like, go to space. And you're like, okay. Also, you mentioned how satisfying it is to get these little nuggets of information and stuff if you find them. And I think the best dopamine rush I ever get is when you visit the ship log and then it shows you all of the stuff that you found, and it's kind of helping you point you in the right direction. Yeah. That's an excellent little thing that not a lot of people realize is there. I know I'm going to give a little shout out on your podcast, friends of the show. But I know Brian from Listoff started playing Outer Wilds, and he had no idea that the ship kept track of everything that you found, which would make playing this game a lot more difficult if you didn't have that. You'd have to bust out the old school pen and paper and write everything down probably. Yeah.
And if this game released in, let's say in a hypothetical world where making this game was possible in, 1990, you definitely would have had to write down your own notes. Back
For
then.
Sure. I will say the ship log in Echoes of the Eye is awful. That's one part of the DLC that does not work for reasons.
Okay, for reasons. So yeah, that's a story. And like, Keith, did you enjoy the story itself that you uncover, like the grand story?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. um,
I mean, I can't say anything, you know, it's one of, besides for this being a puzzle game taking place in space where you can basically go wherever you want. And then it also, with what happens in the game, like I said, I feel like this game was made directly for me. The only thing missing from it is like metal music and Waifu Discover 2.
So the gameplay in Outer Wilds is governed by this time loop. And again, this is in the Steam description for the game. I don't feel like this is a spoiler anymore, that there's a time loop. You have 22 minutes to explore before the loop resets. And this is an interesting one because it's a real-time time loop, as opposed to last week's episode, which was Death Loop, which is kind of like a, you know, you don't really have time pressure in Deathloop. You have time pressure here, not unlike Majora's Mask, but unlike Majora's Mask, you can't really like, you know, slow down time to give yourself like more time to explore. You have a pretty strict 22-minute limit. You can skip ahead if you want to, and since things are happening on a timer, sometimes like that is a good idea to skip ahead. Did you feel like pressure from the time loop? Like, did the specter of like the time loop running out like affect your gameplay at all or your enjoyment of it, Keith?
Yes and no. Before I answer that, there are parts of the game where time does not exist.
Right.
That we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
As far as feeling the pressure of the clock, at the beginning, yes, because there is so much out there to find right away. As the game went on and I was just kind of meandering about the solar system, kind of trying to piece things together, I didn't really care all that much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the first couple of hours is really just kind of like, wait, one more second.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
just, you're not even reading the scrolls anymore. You're just collecting them all so they're at least in your ship, so then you can go back to them upon the reset. So yeah, those first couple hours are pretty hectic, but after a while, I just kind of was fine.
Yeah, the thing that you realize is that the solar system is pretty small, and the planets themselves are pretty small. Like, a lot of the planets you can run from. Like, you can circumnavigate one of the planets in a couple of minutes, especially if you're like jetpack boosting. I'm talking about on foot, not even flying. Like, these are small planets in a small solar system. So the thing that I realized was like, if I like hit the end of the loop before I got to a goal, it would take like less than a minute to get back to that place. Like, from waking up, getting in the ship, flying out to the spot where I was, it's often like a minute or two.
Yeah, that's what I mean when I talk about the sense of scale. It seems so small, but once you're on that planet,
it's dense. There's a lot there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of secrets hidden in places. Like, I can't really think of any of the planets where it's like, this is just, I mean, there's a moon that's just a moon, but other than that, the planets themselves, they got a lot of stuff in them, a lot of stuff to like dig in and explore. And it's just really good. And like, so as a result, I didn't feel this time stress very often. Like you said, the beginning of the game, you're like, fuck. I see something. I want to go see what that is, but the time's running out. You get that. And then at the end of the game, there's a timed like sequence that you have to execute. And so you'll feel the time pressure there a little bit. But for the most part, not really a big deal, because hitting the end of the loop is, I don't know, it thematically is good. I like it in like the sense of like what you're trying to accomplish in the game. I like that there's that time pressure, and the song that plays at the end of the time loop is just such a good song. So like whenever it kicked in, I got that like, oh no, I'm running out of time. Man, this song is beautiful. Like every time it kicked in, I was like, I'm sad that time is running out, but like, man, just take a listen to this song. Like, man, fuck.
It's like it both causes panic, but also kind of like this calm washing over you, where you're just like, all right, I'm gonna get a lot more time once this is over.
Yeah.
And like you said, some of the planets, nothing's wasted in this game.
Yeah.
You're always going to find something, but there are some planets that definitely have a lot more on them, and you're probably going to be spending a lot more time on than others.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever, the loop did reset, I never felt like I was wasting any time until like the very, very late hours of the game, where I was like, I am way too stupid to put these pieces together that I have. So it's just kind of like a lot of wandering for 22 to 44 minutes, 66, etc. Like,
Yeah.
And the clever thing, which I think we'll also kind of talk about after the spoiler wall, is that the time loop doesn't exist just to be a game mechanic. There is a story reason as to why things are starting over.
Yeah, I'm being a little bit coy about why there's a time loop, but it's not just like, it's not an arbitrary time loop. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it just isn't just some thing that they're like, oh, it's a time loop game, so we got to put this in there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just wanted to put that item. That's as far as I'll go.
Yeah, for sure. Flying your ship in this game is something that gets, I think, the most criticism as far as like gameplay goes. If I hear people complain about gameplay in this game, it is that they say flying the ship is difficult. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I don't think this is difficult at all. If you don't have an understanding of how vectors in space work, sure, might be difficult. But because you have to control your up and down thrust, and then your forward and backward thrust with separate controls. And you just have to understand how like acceleration and momentum and things work, physics wise. If you don't, then you're going to crash into a bunch of stuff and have a bad time. But I never felt like this was difficult. And there were a couple times where like when you want to land your ship, you put on like a kind of down-facing landing camera, and you have to, slow down your velocity so that you can land safely on the planet. That gets a little bit hairy sometimes, but again, space is dangerous. Landing a spaceship is probably very difficult. I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with that, but I can guess it's not super easy to do. So like, I didn't have trouble flying the ship. I actually thought it was really fun a lot of times. Did you have trouble with this, Keith?
No. This isn't Kerbal Space Program. I don't know if you've ever played that.
I haven't, but I've heard.
You want to talk about landing difficult ships. Even leaving the planet is hard in Kerbal Space Program.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very simplistic, almost space flight simulator. It's very, very easy to grasp the concept. And one of the things that I even talked about in my Game of the Year episode is that they give you plenty of time to figure out how to fly the ship. There's a small tutorial section on Timberhearth where you're in 0G gravity, and the way your spacesuit works with the jetpacks is somewhat similar to the way the spaceship flies. Mm-hmm. And if that's not enough, They even have a model ship for you to fly on Timberhearth.
Yeah.
Not to mention, once you do get in the spaceship, you're not really in a hurry to do anything. So you can just fly around and just get used to doing that. And by the end of the game, I mean, I was doing like fucking kick flips. It was the best Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. That wasn't Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, man. I mean, I was just doing some crazy shit with the spaceship by the end of the game.
Yeah, and there's an autopilot for the spaceship too, and the game will even tell you, like you said, the spaceship's kind of like low tech. So the game will even tell you, like, hey, kind of be careful with this autopilot. Like, it's not perfect. And if you just set the autopilot, it will fly you in a straight line to wherever you're going. And if the sun is in that straight line, you will fly directly into the sun using the autopilot. But like, yeah, I thought that was just kind of a charming piece of the game. Like, obviously, there's probably a programming reason why they didn't make it a perfect autopilot, but also it fits in like story-wise, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever went to any of the planets without the autopilot.
Yeah.
I might fly like up to the planet, and then just kind of maneuver wherever I need to land. But I would almost never just willy-nilly just fly freehand, fly.
Raw.
Yeah, never going raw.
Yeah, flying and like taking off from the spaceship feels, you get like a rush from doing it. Like the sound design when you're doing it, the way it feels
so good.
It does. Yeah. Like when I took my couple years break and then started the game up again, and when you take off for the first time, it's like, whoa, this is cool. Like I'm fucking taking off in a spaceship.
Yeah, and it's a very fragile ship as well. I mean, like I said, it's mostly made of wood.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of situations where you might be out in the middle of space and you have to just go out in the middle of space, in the middle of nowhere, and fix your ship. Otherwise, you ain't going anywhere. You are stranded. So that's also kind of a mechanic that you very much have to get used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your ship will get dinged up and you have to go out and fix some stuff. And there's so everything's working on this physics system with like velocities going in all directions and stuff. And there's a button to match velocities with whatever your, reticule is pointing at, which is super helpful. You use that all the time. But so again, it's like, it's not
when you're out in the middle of
space
and you're trying to figure out how to fix your ship, I am constantly hammering on the X button to match velocity so you don't lose the ship.
Same thing when you're trying to land on a planet or land on something else that's flying, super fast through space. You mentioned the jetpacking. So when you get out of the ship and you're in your spacesuit, you have a little jetpack thruster, which kind of operates with the same controls as the ship, except now you're on a planet most of the time. So now you have to contend with gravity as part of your equation. And this game has some platforming as a result of this. This was what I got frustrated with the first time I played. And it's not that like, so upon further like play and thought, it's not that it's like bad. It's just sometimes there's some hard platforming. I thought using the jetpack with all of the other forces that are pulling on your character, gravity and such, can be kind of tough platforming wise. And while you're platforming, you have to manage your fuel supply, you have to manage your oxygen and stuff like that. So you can't just be out in space indefinitely in your jetpack, which again makes sense. You're not supposed to be out there. Space is dangerous.
I would say you would never want to be away from your ship for too long. You want to know exactly where it is. There are a few planets that will just have oxygen and fuel tanks laying around, but they're very sparse.
Yeah.
And there are times where you cannot have your ship conveniently on hand or nearby, because there are times where you're going to have to leave the ship for a very long time. So yeah, the oxygen and the jet fuel management can get,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say annoying, because it's just a very real part of space exploration. So it didn't bother me that much. In fact, I mean, I think it just created a lot of interesting situations where I'd be like, well, I've traveled as far as I can go. Now, how in the hell do I get back to my ship? Which is a whole other type of exploration on its own, depending on if, my ship's on the other side of the solar system. And sometimes that kind of stuff would just lead me to discovering something else that I had completely just missed on my original, walkthrough of what I was doing.
A little touch that I liked in like managing your oxygen and your fuel and stuff like that is if you run out of fuel, then you'll start using your oxygen supply as fuel, which really it's like a last ditch, like desperation move. Like you don't want to be doing this, but when it does happen, you do feel that kind of, the climax of a space movie where like, you're like, oh shit, this is not going well. Let me see if I can survive this. And you do get into some of those like really kind of gritty moments like that.
Going back to the platforming, there were some... I think the only issue I had with the platforming was just on the gas planet, Giant's Deep. And that's only because you can't really platform, even though you have to in some ways, because the gravity is just so heavy. Otherwise, like, I don't know, man, I was just zooming all over the place. And one of the most fun things is when you're on the Ash Twins and your ship accidentally gets sucked up into the sandstorm. One of the things I always love doing is just matching the velocity of the planet's orbit, leaving the orbit, and then landing on the planet, of the other planet.
You can kind of get into some fun with the physics system sometimes. Yeah, I'll tell you the part that I got frustrated with the platforming in the spoiler section. It's a very like specific and very spoilery thing that happened. So I'll let you know in a little bit. The last thing as far as gameplay goes is that this game has a lot of reading in it. This is not a voice acted game. So if you're the type who like is averse to reading in games, this is probably not the game for you, because your discoveries and stuff, a lot of that is going to be reading, which I think is cool. And this is a game about learning what's going on, what happened in the universe. So I don't mind this, but I know some people don't like, reading in video games. Outer Wilds may not be the game for you there, but I enjoyed it. And I think the writing itself is pretty good. Like, I don't know. I never thought to myself, like, I never thought that that's like bad writing or boring writing.
It's serviceable.
And sometimes in indie games, like sometimes the people that make indie games are not professional writers, and they are writing it because they are the only person to write it. And so sometimes indie game writing can be a little bit cringy. Sometimes, like very specific games. I'm not saying like indie games have bad writing as a whole. This game's not like that though. Like I generally enjoyed the writing in this game.
It's interesting because, you know what? It's spoiler territory. I can't even go there. I can't even talk about it. Just fuck it. I can't even talk about it.
It's a tough one. Tough episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the last couple things before spoiler time, which are the music and the sound design in this game is very good. I mentioned the song that plays at the end of your time loop as very good, but like each of the planets has a theme, and they kind of match the vibe on those planets. And I think that this game has a very good soundtrack. It's very, kind of fitting with that outdoorsy theme. It's a lot of like instruments that you might hear around a campfire, you know, acoustic guitar, banjo, some simple drums, stuff like that. I really enjoyed the soundtrack.
Yeah, I just don't know what to talk. I feel like the music is very integral to the entire experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the music is very human. It's very like terrestrial, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of it is like kind of like this calming folk music. You know, going back to campfires and stuff. It's something you would hear like somebody just kind of like playing around on a guitar, you know, on a campfire. Yeah, and like you said, the planets have their own themes, which is there's a reason for that. You know, visually, the planets have their own characteristics, which is they're just so creatively, they're just so gorgeous, but they also have those audible characteristics as well, which is very interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes too, you'll get in situations where there is no music and you can only hear like the sound of your character breathing in their spacesuit. And that is after having all of this kind of warm soundtrack in a lot of the places that you're going. Even when you're flying in space, the music, the backing music when you're in your spaceship is calming and warm. And then sometimes that's taken away and all you can hear is the sound of your character breathing and you feel lonely and, stranded out in space. You definitely get that feeling just from sound design.
Sometimes when you are feeling lonely in the middle of space, you can just point towards any of those planets and hear something very familiar. I will say
that's also
to
true.
go along with what we were talking about, how this game can be very scary. There's some very scary songs in this game also, and I wouldn't really call them songs. It's just more of like, again, it's just this ambiance.
Yeah, definitely. Sound design and like soundtrack is very thoughtful in this game. And, the ones that are, songs as we might think of them, they're enjoyable to listen to. And then the ones that are more just like, soundscape or, ambient music, that stuff is really fitting for where you are and what you're doing in the game. So yeah, very thoughtful, very enjoyable. I talked about that feeling of taking off in the spaceship. I really love just the sound design and the power behind taking off in the spaceship. Right. It's a great sounding game. And you talked about the visuals, like the planets are not like, Mass Effect planets that are just kind of these anonymous, like, barren places that you're only there to, take minerals or something, or go into like one, raider camp and take them out or something like that. All the planets here are like very lovingly visually designed, as well as like, game designed. They have a lot of character, like you said. It's almost like the planets are their own characters in a lot of cases. Yeah. Good stuff. Let's get into some kind of final thoughts and like who we would recommend Outer Wilds to before we get into spoilers. So Keith, guest always goes first. Who would you recommend Outer Wilds to? Like, it's very clear that we think this game is very well made, but I don't think this game is for everybody. So who would you personally recommend it to?
I mean, I would recommend it to anybody, honestly.
Okay. Fair enough.
Because we haven't been able to go past towards just being vague, so I haven't really gushed about this game that much. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even talk about this without spoiling anything. So, Outer Wilds is like a deeply personal game for me. It is like a game that came out like not came out. I got the game at the right time, essentially, in my life.
Yeah.
And like, this is going to sound stupid 2 years out. It's going to sound very cliche when I say that 2020 was a real bad year for me.
You don't say.
It was a bad year yeah. So there was just a lot of very personal things that I was dealing with on top of the pandemic being in full force, obviously, and all the social baggage that comes with that. So even though I didn't play Outer Wilds when it came out, and I didn't even play it in 2020, I played it in January of 2021, which is just on the other side of New Year's, which, when you think about it, is when people believe that we wipe this non-existent slate clean and start things fresh and whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, when it comes to Outer Wilds, like, story-wise and mechanically, Outer Wilds is a very complex game. It is a wildly adventurous puzzle box, which I think would suit somebody who is very much looking for a very good puzzle game. A lot of puzzle games don't even bother to put a story in there.
Right.
And the story is interwoven into the mechanics. Visually, the game is breathtaking. There's some we haven't talked about them yet, but there's some like very physically like powerful, almost like stomach dropping moments in this game.
Yep.
And if you are super nerdy, you know, it blends like this retro sci-fi aesthetic with like some actual like real life science, and it marries all of that stuff perfectly. And I don't know how the fuck they did it. And it's a game that reminds you, like, no matter what, like, the character that you play as in Outer Wilds, right, doesn't matter. The universe does not care about this character that does it. And again, that space is just indifferent to whoever you are. It doesn't care. It is a meticulously crafted game. And like I said, it's a great space simulation without being as mathy as like Kerbal Space Program.
Mm-hmm.
It's I wouldn't want to say it's arcadey, but it's very much a video game, you know?
Yeah.
But again, on top of that is just this fucking incredible story that we will get into. It completely caught me off guard with just how great it is. It's a story that's bleak, but there's hope, right? It's like, it reminds you that it's always darkest before the dawn, right? Which is something I forgot about in 2020, honestly. And having played this game just after all of that, even though some would say we're still in it, it was magical for me, you know?
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say right now. Yeah, I don't really care who you are. I feel like you should just pick up this game.
Yeah. There's a specific set of like people who play video games for like casual enjoyment that I don't know if they're going to be able to like really dig in and like really love this game on like, you know, the level that I think you and I do. Not that there's anything wrong, of course, with just like, you know, playing casual games for casual enjoyment. That's cool. Engage with it however you want to. I feel like a lot of people who are listening to a show like this, though, are playing games because you love it as like an artistic medium, and the way that video games can tell stories in ways that other media can't really is something that I really, it's like, you know, it's the reason I play video games and I don't watch movies when I have free time, because I just like the way a video game can do it. And Keith, you've said this a couple times throughout the show, but the way that Outer Wilds made this clockwork solar system, made these mechanics, this physics system, and then made a story and a storytelling like style that all perfectly fits together really does give you these like incredible, like you said, stomach dropping moments at some point throughout the game. And so like when I think about this game, I don't really think about how much I enjoyed flying the spaceship or something like that. Like, you know, another video game set in space, you might think like, I really love flying the spaceships in Star Wars Battlefront 2 or something like that. That's not really what I take away from this game. It's like the thrill of discovery, the thrill of like finding out what's happening, and then also the thrill of what's happening, actually. Like, you're discovering what's going on, but the stuff you're discovering is also really, really good, all tied into like this, all parts of this game. I think they come together really, really well. So like, if what we've described doesn't sound like a game you would like, then like, you know, trust yourself. But I do kind of agree that for people who really love video games for what they can offer as an artistic medium, as opposed to, you know, paintings or film or TV or something like that, then Outer Wilds, I think, definitely should be on the list of games to play. And when you think about how small the team was that worked on it and how many people, like, at the beginning, it was just, you know, one dude working on this thing, and more people got involved and eventually, you know, published by Annapurna and stuff like that. But this feels like an impossible task for a small group of people. Students at that, too. Like, these are game design students. These are not seasoned game design professionals that made this, at least not in the early stages. So it really is. It's just like a kind of an incredible feat, and the game is good. That's like the key thing here. So yeah, big ramble, but great game to sum it up.
Yeah, it's more of an experience than it is a video game.
It gets video gamey at times, but as opposed to a lot of games that I play, the gameplay itself is not what I take away from this. It's the, like you said, the experience, the discovery, and how it all ties together, which we're going to get into in the spoilers section coming up. But before we get into spoilers, Keith, where can people find the Main Quest podcast?
Well, on this very podcast app that they're listening to your show on, or website, or RSS feed, just search Main Quest Podcast. You can find me on all major platforms and whatever indie platforms there are. If you want to get a hold of me on social media, I'm very open to conversation. Maybe you want to talk about more Outer Wilds. Always down for that. Yeah. You can message me on Instagram. That's the Main Quest on Instagram, separated by the line
underscores
thingies. I can't. Thank you. And you can also hit me up on Twitter, and that is, I know my socials, you know, I've only done this like a million times, but it's been 5 months almost. @_main quest. Through the power of editing, that will not have taken 2 minutes of your time.
Right. And people can check down in the show notes for all things Main Quest. I have given it my recommendation many times in the past, but it's a show that I listen to high up on the priority list every week of podcasts. There's so many people making great video games podcasts, and the Main Quest is one of those for sure. So I highly recommend it. And again, like I always tell you, Keith, I'm very excited to hear you talk about games that I like as you get into newer and newer games. Actually, I'm very excited for you to get into the N64 era, because I have big N64 opinions, and I don't cover a lot of N64 games on this show. So I'm excited to hear you kind of revisit those.
Well, hopefully by the time this comes out, you will be on an episode of a game I I think you might like. I'm not sure. I don't know.
We talking about Mario? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So,
I like that game, but I also have opinions about that. It's a weird one. So,
well, I can't wait.
Yeah, Main Quest podcast. Everyone check that out. For Tales from the Backlog, ways to support the show, please hit subscribe if you haven't already. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, please consider leaving a rating and review if your platform allows it, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, stuff like that. And as always, the best thing to do is to tell a friend. And people react poorly to recommending podcasts, especially. But if they are your real friend, they will not disown you for recommending a podcast to them. Please recommend. That helps out a lot. Tales from the Backlog has a Discord server, and if you want to come in and talk Outer Wilds with Keith and I and other people, other cool people in the Discord server, I recommend you do that. Good times. I also have another show called A Top 3 Podcast, where each episode is a top 3 list about some topic, kind of random topics, sometimes video games, but most often not. A lot of food talk on that show, which is where we're really in our element. Feel free to check out A Top 3 Podcast. I think that's a good time. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, it's spoiler time for Outer Wilds. Okay, Keith and I are back, and we're talking spoilers for Outer Wilds. And man, we cut the spoiler thing like real early, even before like the oh shit moment. Like I debated whether to mention about the Know My Mask that turns and looks at you in the museum as you're leaving, like in the tutorial.
Yeah.
But I decided not to, because that was a like big moment where I was like, oh, this is a cute thing. I'm going to go out in space. Oh, they taught me how to use my jetpack. And yeah, you know, very normal so far. And then suddenly this like mask in a museum turns and looks at you. Things get real like spacey wacy for a second.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, what the fuck was that? And now like your curiosity's peaked and you're like, okay, let's go. Let's go find out what the hell's happening here.
So can I ask you what was the first thing you did when you left Timberhearth?
Yeah, so I went to Brittle Hollow because I think they tell you to point your like signal scope out into space, and you'll hear the dude playing the instrument, the guy who's kind of trapped under like the layers of the crust there.
Right.
So that's where I went first, and this is why I quit playing the game the first time, because of the black hole inside. And you're platforming like on these like wooden platforms, and sometimes they just fucking break, and then you fall down into the black hole. And there's a way to like reset the loop, as you know, but I didn't know that, and I didn't have it at the time. So that got super frustrating because it kicks you out into space, and you're like, you have to jetpack your way over to that white hole station, and that just happened to me over and over again. And I don't think I was in the headspace of just like, you know, if you hit resistance on one planet, go someplace else. Because this was at the beginning of the game, and the game's first like tip was telling me explore Brittle Hollow. So that was the first place I went, and that's why I quit the first time, why I got frustrated with the platforming. All in one.
Interesting. Because my first thought was, well, the closest thing near me is Addlerock, which is Timberhearth's moon.
Yeah.
And that clearly has no atmosphere. It doesn't look very big. And I barely know how to fly the ship yet. So I figured that was probably going to be like a good area just to kind of fuck around and try and land on. And so that was the first area that I went to, which doesn't have a lot of stuff on it, but you do get a little bit of dialogue from one of the NPCs that's on the planet.
Yeah.
Or on the moon, I should say.
So this is why, like, I don't think the spoiler section here would be like a beat by beat thing, because we probably went at this in like totally different orders and stuff like that. But yeah, that black hole was like, I don't know. I thought it was kind of bullshit the first time, that like I felt like the game was pushing me to that planet, and it turns out that planet, Brittle Hollow, is like one of the more hostile planets in the
well, they don't necessarily push you towards any one planet, though. They just
they don't like
go.
Push you, but someone says like this other explorer, I forget his name, but the guy that's there, they said like he went out into space. Maybe point your scope and find that, and then follow what you find. So that was, to me, that felt like the game pushing me toward that planet first, which is not 100% true. I know that now, but that was what I felt like at the time.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. So the one thing that we kind of skirted around before was the time loop, but we didn't mention what happened.
Full disclosure, I knew that was going to happen.
Oh, you
just
fucker.
From like...
You would know.
I mean, I didn't like spoil myself on it, but I did, I read a couple of reviews and people mentioned that. And honestly, I was planning on saying that in the non-spoiler part here, but then I forgot. So, but yeah, going supernova, the supernova explosion like looks incredible and sounds really good too. Like it sounds dangerous as fuck. So like when that first happened, I was like, oh wow, this is number one, this is cool. But number two, did you ever try to like run away from it? Like that's gonna fucking do anything? Like I definitely did.
Dude, yeah, I would always just like, I would try and go through, if I was like on Brittle Hollow, I would just immediately dive into the black hole. And then just kind of watch it from like the very outer edge of the solar system. So for me, like the first time I encountered the supernova was again just that mix of just terrifying awe, basically. Yeah. Because again, I was on Addle Rock. I was still on Addle Rock, and I was exploring the ruins that are there. And all of a sudden, the music kicks in, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, this must be a sign that I found something important. Maybe I found some sort of progression, because within those ruins is just kind of like a lore-wise, the Noma originally used the ruins to try and find the eye.
Right.
Is it just called the eye? I can't remember.
Yeah, the eye of the universe.
The eye of the universe, yeah, that's what they were using.
Yeah.
So they were using it to try and find that, and there's stuff you can do in those ruins. And I was like, oh, there's something I have to do here because this music is playing now. Like I'm clearly doing something right.
Oh, yeah.
But then all of a sudden, everything goes black. Everything is black. All you see is just space. And I'm panicking. And in my panic, I'm moving the camera around, like looking like what is happening. And then suddenly like this giant bluish white light source appears, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then you just wake up at the campfire again.
Yeah.
It is just one of those because I went into the game completely blind, and one of the many moments that I will never forget from this game where I was just like, I can't quite put together what just happened here.
Yeah, I imagine it would have been really, perplexing like that if you did experience it in that way. I knew there was going to be a supernova though. So, one like really memorable thing I had with like the kind of the physics system of the game before, like I didn't want to mention this before, but like on Brittle Hollow again with that black hole, I had landed my ship on some like outer part of the crust, and as the time loop progresses, the crust starts to crumble and fall into the black hole, and a piece just broke off and took my ship down into the black hole. And you have like that little marker on your HUD that shows where your ship is and how far. So it's like suddenly like ship 50 meters, 100, 200, 400, 500, 7.5 kilometers when it gets spat out at the other end of the solar system. And I was just kind of standing there, like, I imagine my character like with his mouth open, just like, what do now?
Right. And you have like, I don't know if it was the same for you, but every time I go into that black hole, I have that stomach dropping feeling because it is such an unnatural thing to do. Just like, well, I guess I just got to jump in this black hole now. You know?
Yeah, a little bit of vertigo when you jump in there.
Definitely, because it is very disorientating when you jump in because everything around you is getting all fucked up.
Yeah.
But mechanically, it serves as like kind of like a, I don't want to say fast travel in the way that like you can go from place to place using this black hole. You are just spat out at one end of the solar system. But next to the white hole is this giant station, the white hole station you mentioned previously, which has a teleporter on it, which sends you directly back to Brittle Hollow. So it's somewhat helpful.
It's not super helpful, like gameplay. It's just getting you back to the place where you were before, but it's a really nice like gameplay addition to not have falling in the black hole be like a death sentence. Basically, you
right.
Can get back.
That's what I was saying. Yeah,
but also like plays into the story really well because that's like the heart of what the Nomai were discovering. That was like the first part that led them on this like big quest that they were trying to do. So like if you're listening, it's been a while, the Nomai realized that upon entering the black hole and exiting the white hole, there was a little time delay. And they are a very science-driven people. They were a very science-driven people. I guess, I don't know. You're listening to this and you're not going to play Outer Wilds. The Nomai were a kind of species of alien that is, you're just finding their writing all over the place. And you don't find any of them for a long time. Like this is the mystery that you're working on is what happened to the Nomai? Why did that happen? And also like kind of what does it mean for me? So the Nomai, very technologically advanced in contrast to your species. Go ahead.
I was just going to say you are just finding a lot of their corpses most of the time.
Yeah. Their corpses and then their writings. They seem like they communicate through writing with each other. So you're picking up on that. You have a little translator that can help you with that. So they're trying to like use this, this anomaly or trying to understand it in hopes to like find the eye of the universe, if I'm remembering that right. And so they're trying to point a kind of orbital cannon to shoot like a vessel to the eye of the universe. And so what they realized is that it would just take them too long to get it right. Threading the needle in the middle of space would just be impossibly difficult. And also, I think the eye of the universe works on those like quantum mechanics like the moon does, the quantum moon. So they created this time loop in order to give themselves enough time to get this right, basically. Keep testing, keep discovering. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that this is like part of like this big red herring in the game that I thought was really good. The first half of the what happened to the Nomai question is that they created this time loop, and by using the energy of a supernova, they could extend this to 22 minutes, which is your time loop. And so it gives you this feeling at the beginning that the Nomai are the bad guys, that every fucked up thing that's happening to you is their fault. And that's not true. But for the first, like, once you discover what they were trying, and then, so I'll say like the middle third of the game, maybe, you think this is their fault. And I was like, first of all, when I found this out, I was like, how could they, you know, stuff like that. But then when I found out that wasn't true, I thought that this was just like really awesome, that they set up this red herring like this.
This is one of those very gut-wrenching, like impactful moments that I love, is when you get to the sun station, which is intimidating all on its own, because once you first teleport there and you open up the emergency hatch and you have to fly over to the other side, and there's just nothing below you. There's just the sun. It's just the fucking sun. You know, it's right there. And you fly to the other, and then you find the writings, and you actually find what happened, and they had attempted to have the sun go supernova, but it didn't work.
Right.
And you're like, what the fuck happened? And then there's actually really no way for you to leave the sun station. So you are just kind of, the developers intentionally have to, basically they just make you sit there with the corpses, with this revelation that they in fact haven't done anything, and that you find out that the universe is just dying.
Yeah. So like, this is not an artificially created supernova. This is just the natural end of your sun. And I thought, I love that red herring. I loved, first, when you begin the game, you're kind of fascinated by the Nomai because they're so much more technologically advanced than your species, the Hearthians. And then you get this, or you get the information that they were trying to create a supernova, and you're like, these motherfuckers. And then you find out that they failed, and then you find out what actually happened to them, like much later in the story. And it's a real roller coaster. Again, really, like, the way that they could give you all of these nuggets in such a non-linear way, but have it coalesce into such an affecting story is like, it's really incredible. Like, this shouldn't work. Like, my brain hurts thinking about how they would have had to make sure that this all works in the way that they intended. It's really, really crazy.
Yeah, I have no idea, dude. It's fucking ingenious. It's so good.
So, again, they tried to make a supernova. It failed, but the sun goes supernova, and it kind of kicks in this time loop. So they succeeded in making a time loop, but they failed in, you know, their mission to get to the eye of the universe. So that kind of like becomes your mission to get there.
They did find it, but they died.
They found it, but they couldn't get there.
Right.
Yeah, they got painfully and painfully close to it, but they couldn't get all the way.
Yeah.
So like, you actually find out the opposite of like the Nomai being bad people. You find a log, and like it's possible to find these out of order, I think, or maybe they strategically put some of these logs in places that you can't access until you would have already gotten the information. So you go from this swing of like the Nomai being horrible to the Nomai actually were really good. They took steps to make sure that they wouldn't hurt this primitive life that they found on Timber Hearth, which eventually became you. So again, it's that swing, like, fuck the Nomai, this is their fault. Wait, the only reason I'm here is because they were like, nope, let's not, strip mine the hell out of this planet. Let's leave enough for them so that they can grow up, evolve, have enough resources to become a spacefaring species as well. Just really interesting the way that they played with your emotions with all this.
And there's, you mentioned that, you don't meet a Nomai until, much later in the game.
And that's optional too.
Yeah, there's a very good chance you might never meet them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's whole, the whole quantum moon thing and the quantum physics thing is all very over my head. I understood it on a very basic level because throughout the game they show you multiple times this mechanic of if you are not observing the object, or rather, you should always be observing the object, because if you're not, it will move.
Right.
Which very much comes into play when we talk about the quantum moon.
We can talk about that now, because that's a little like side plot that's, I feel like it's either entirely optional or it's mostly optional to like get to the quantum moon. You get a very
good chunk of information if you do figure it out.
Oh yeah, you get an incredible payoff if you do figure it out.
And that's the quantum moon stuff was like the only thing. That was the only part of the game that I had to like actually look up, because I did not understand the polls. Even though I know they give you that info, like playing through it now, having played through it twice more, I should say. I know they do give you that information, but my first playthrough, I was just like, how the fuck do I get through this tower? Because what happens is eventually you reach, is it the quantum tower, or it has a name? The Nomai gave it a name, but it is this tower that lets you traverse through the quantum moon, essentially. But in order to get to certain parts of the moon, you have to travel to its different poles, which is something I just did not understand when I first initially played the game.
Yeah, I needed a guide for that too. It was just a little bit too complicated for me to kind of puzzle out naturally. So I needed a guide too. It's very
complicated.
But I really liked, like, I figured out, early on, they're kind of giving you the information on how to interact with the quantum moon kind of piecemeal. Like you start out and you figure out it disappears if you're not looking at it, but your camera counts as looking at it. So if you take a picture of it and keep your picture up, then it won't disappear, and stuff like that. So they're giving you that, and then you get into like the quantum, it's like quantum training tower or something, where they give you more information on how to do it. It was just a little bit too much though, so I needed some help. I used a guide, and then it was definitely worth it though, because you're following the breadcrumbs of this other Nomai who is trying to go there. And so you're following in their footsteps through their training to get there. But I just assumed that they were dead the whole time, because all the other Nomai are dead. Why would this one be alive? Did you think that too?
So, I mean, after the conversation, it's kind of clear what happened to him. But I mean, when you get there, you do see his body. So that was one of the things where I was like, when I finally did walk up to him and he was alive, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening here?
Yeah. I should rephrase. I did not expect to be able to talk to a Nomai when I got to I arrived there.
And even at that point, like, everything about the quantum moon is 10,000% unsettling. Yeah. And so then already on top of walking up to this Nomai, I'm like, what is going to happen? Like, do I even try to interact with this thing? And I mean, I think like canonically the character is a woman. It's a she, a female, but she says that she's basically your friend or whatever. And
yeah.
And by the end of the conversation, she's like, I don't even think I'm alive. She said something like, I'm just a ghost. Yeah. And it has something to do with, once you are on the quantum moon, you become
quantumized or something.
Yeah. Like, it's parallel universes almost. And so that's why every time you go to a different part of the quantum moon, you might see the same body, but it's a different body. And in each of those realms, 1 out of 6 of them, she survived, if that makes sense.
It does not. But that was kind of how I felt playing the game too. But I tell you, man, like when I think you like come over a hill or a little like crest or something like that, and when you see the Nomai standing there, I was like, oh fuck, like what do I do? You know, I did not. It was like seeing an alien. You know?
Yeah.
And so you're like, you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know anything about what's about to happen.
Right.
But you have a really nice, like sweet conversation with them where they kind of say like, you know, oh, I remember you, your species, you made it, you did it, you made it out into space and stuff like that. And then, yeah, she at the end, I think you're right. I think it's a she, but they tell you like, you know, I'm not really sure if I'm alive or not right here. And that was kind of like, oh, that kind of sucks because, you know, I'm going to be alive. I'm going to keep on going. But it seems like they're kind of stuck there, but they have this kind of curiosity about what's going on. So they don't seem super like defeated by it. They're more like, I'm going to keep learning while I'm here, kind of.
She's happy to know that somebody else is going to be going to the eye.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives her hope,
quest.
which I think is a very good parallel to the DLC, which can't really.
That fits in with the end of the base game too. Kind of
right.
That hope that like, you know, this didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to for me, but there's hope for the next. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
So with what actually happened to the Nomai, I had a really hard time with the comet, like inside in the ghost matter. We didn't really talk about ghost matter a lot. I don't love ghost matter as a thing. I don't like that it kills you instantly.
I feel like you don't encounter it too much throughout the game, but when you do, it's like, oh fuck, now I gotta like I have to reorientate myself and kind of come up with a different strategy as far as traversal goes.
It became like whenever I saw ghost matter, I was like, oh fuck, I'm gonna die here at least 2 times. I'm gonna have to fly back here, and it got into tedium a couple of times. And I think the worst part is inside of the interloper, the comet.
Oh really?
Which makes sense because that's the source of the ghost matter. But it's like you're going down, you know, tube slides, and then sometimes it's just like, oh, you're supposed to go on the one on the left, the one you went down, full of ghost matter, and you can shoot your probe in to find ghost matter, but like I still died a couple times on that. But it makes sense that there's a ton in there because it's the source of the ghost matter.
Right. So okay, so this thing at some point in the story, if I'm getting this right, explodes, and this is what kills the Nomai.
Yeah, it came into the solar system. It introduced, I don't know if it exploded or crashed into something, I'm not sure, but it introduced all the ghost matter into the system and killed the Nomai. Yeah.
Okay. That's not, because that's what I didn't quite understand was how the ghost matter got everywhere. Yeah,
again, I'm not sure if it exploded. Oh, it probably did explode because when you're inside, when you see the big, you know, mother of all ghost matter crystals,
right.
And you see the Nomai, there's a log where they say like this thing is under intense pressure.
So then why is it still around?
Good question.
Because the Nomai died like hundreds of thousands of years before the game takes place. So
they died a long time ago. Yeah.
Comet still there?
Good question. I have no answer for that.
That's what I could not wrap my head around, because I was like, so they died, it got everywhere, but also the comet is still here. Because I don't think it fits in the time loop, because it would have blown up already. It would have been it would have blown up before that. I don't know. Fuck. I hate time.
All right. So theory is the crystal that they're looking at kind of looks like it burst out in one direction. So maybe the comet flies in, it gets close to the sun exposes like the inner layer of the comet because it melts the ice, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the crystal of ghost matter like partially exploded, like a Mount St. Helens explosion out the side or something like that. Sprayed ghost matter all over out of the opening that's created by the sun melting the ice, covering the comet. And then the comet is on an orbit, so it's just coming back again and again and again. Maybe that's what's going on.
I'll accept that theory.
Thank you. I will accept my Nobel Prize in physics anytime. But inside of that, when you see the the logs from the Nomai that are in there, that was one of the first like very sad Nomai things, I think.
Yeah.
Because these were seemed like some of the main Nomai characters, and definitely the ones who were at the head of some of like the experiments that you've been reading. Like you read a lot of these logs from, I think there's one named Pi and stuff like that. They're kind of the ones that are like heading this, Sun Station time loop launch cannon development. And then you find their bodies inside of this. And it was one of those situations where it's like they went inside the comet, and then once they figured out that what was happening, it was too late. They had no shot. And one of the logs kind of says that. And that was kind of sad because you got to know, and I assume most people would have gotten to like these characters. They seem like very likable characters. Then you find out what happens.
It's a very similar moment. I think that's kind of like the Sun Station moment where, except that I feel like this is a lot more heartbreaking. Whereas like the part of the Sun Station is kind of like this huge story revelation. The stuff on the interloper what's the name of the comet? The stuff that happens inside there is you are trapped. You can't get out of the interloper. You're trapped just like they were. And you're in around this very, very giant pit of ghost matter. And there are just these Nomai bodies, floating around in zero gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And they're almost perfectly preserved. They're not skeletons like the other ones. And this like very light piano is playing. It's so fucking heartbreaking, man.
It is.
It's so visually heartbreaking, and your only way out is just you gotta kill yourself, start the loop over.
Yep. And then another detail that I thought was cool, like once you find out that this is what killed the Nomai, the ghost matter, finding out, or like maybe piecing together that your species survived because ghost matter is inert in water, and your species was an underwater species at the time. So that's why you survived.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Okay. You get a log that says like ghost matter is rendered inert if it's underwater, if it gets wet or something like that. And you find a Nomai drawing of your species. It's you because of the number of eyes in the drawing. Your character has 3 eyes, I think, 4 eyes. Can't remember.
4.
Anyway.
You want to know
4.
something? You want to know a little tidbit? Interesting. Mm-hmm. So we have 4 eyes, right? Our characters are alien race, 4 eyes. Nomai have 3.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like a name for the race. I just know the developers call them ghost birds. So the ghost birds in the DLC have 2 eyes.
Okay.
And then you have the eye of the universe.
Uh-huh. Outer Wilds 2 will have you playing characters with no eyes then.
Put some Bloodborne in here.
Grant us eyes. All right, so 2 tragedies with the Nomai. And the first one is that they were so close to succeeding in their mission, but just this thing that's totally out of their control came in and wiped them out, right? The ones that are in the solar system. And then the ones that go into Dark Bramble following the Eye, their story was super heartbreaking too. But before we get to that, I really like how the game tutorializes some of these kind of wonky, spacey things, you know? They tutorialize how quantum stuff works really, really well by just giving you these random rocks. And they tutorialize how the Dark Bramble works well too, by having that Dark Bramble seed fall on your home planet. Mm-hmm. And then you can hear your one of your like astronaut buddies. You can hear their instrument signal through the thing, and you can shoot your probe in, and suddenly your probe is like forever away out in the universe. So then by the time you get to Dark Bramble, all that time later, you understand how this works, and it makes the end of the other Nomai, like the ones that went out on this expedition, it makes the way they died super, super heartbreaking.
So let me ask you this. What scared you more? Going to the core of Giant's Deep or going through Dark Bramble?
Dark Bramble, for sure. Okay,
see, for me, it was going to Giant's Deep's core, because I have that water phobia thing.
Yeah. I had to look at a guide to get into the core of Giant's Deep.
Yeah, that was the other part I had to look up a guide for, because when I first landed on Giant's Deep, I was going way too fast, and I went underneath the water, and there was a jellyfish there, which freaked the fuck out of me.
Yeah, you don't expect to see things that are alive in this game.
Dude, and underwater in very dark water, Dave. And I'm freaking out because I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And I touched one, and then all of a sudden my ship just completely loses power, and I'm basically fucked on Giant's Deep, essentially. Yeah. I was just basically kind of stranded there because it's impossible to do anything because the gravity is so heavy.
Yeah.
So when I was going through Dark Bramble and you come across the dead jellyfish and you find that note that was left behind where one of the, I think it's a Herthian that leaves the note behind, is like, oh yeah, it's like safe inside the jellyfish.
Yeah.
And I kind of was like skeptical because I was like, is this like a joke that the developers are playing on us? Because I was like, I touched that jellyfish and my ship was fucked.
Also, I know how jellyfish work. It's not safe inside of a jellyfish.
Exactly. Like, I'm like, I don't trust this. And so for the longest time on, the ship's log, it was like outlined like, Giant's Deep core ? Known like in a picture. And I was just like, well, how the fuck?
Yeah.
Because when you try to just get there in your ship, all you see is, which is also very frightening, is just this giant black orb, as the core underneath this water.
It's like a ball of electricity or something.
Yeah, it's fucking freaky, dude. Yeah. And yeah, I had to look up a guide to figure out how to get under there because I didn't trust what the game was telling me.
So I didn't see that log that tells you about how it's safe inside jellyfish. I didn't see that until after I had looked in a guide, because I think you get that information pretty deep into Dark Bramble, like when you find your, the other Herthian that went inside.
It's after you find the distress signal from the escape pod.
Yeah, so I didn't find that information before I was like, I have to get in the core and I don't know how. I'm just going to look at a guide because I don't know what random place in the solar system is going to give me this one specific piece of information I need. I thought it was cool, like figuring out how to get under the current and like using the other, the counterclockwise tornado and stuff like that. We haven't really talked about those like puzzles like that. There's so many little mini puzzles you have to solve, and they're all just so satisfying to figure out how to do it.
Did you do that the correct way?
I did, because the first time, I went to Giant's Deep. I didn't notice anything different about the tornadoes. So I explored and then I left, but I found the station, the Nomai station, where they're researching this, and they have a little demonstration. Yeah, the observatory. So I did figure that out the intended way.
Yeah, so we talked prior to the spoiler wall, we talked about how much time you will spend on any given planet, and Brittle Hollow is one of the planets where you're going to be spending a ton of time on. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had to get into the observatory. I just did not know how. And so and this is one of the things you could totally do if you figure it out, if you're good, if you, I guess, fly the ship well enough. I waited until 15 minutes in, when Brittle Hollows, you could pretty much just fly right inside of it. Mm-hmm. And I flew my ship right underneath the planet's crust, right into where the path leads to the entrance of the observatory underground, and just jammed my ship right up in the fucking crack of that thing and jettisoned myself out of the ship so that I would just fly right against the wall and hit a ledge. And lo and behold, there's actually a path that you have to follow because there's these glowing crystals that allow you to basically defy gravity and walk on walls that the Nomai developed as a way to get around the black hole. Didn't know that. I didn't know that. I just stubbornly just shoved my ship all up in that planet. Got in there. And that's how I figured out the whole tornado thing prior to actually getting to the core.
Yeah, and I like how this game does that, where your knowledge is what allows you access to a lot of these places, not unlocking some arbitrary thing in the game, doing something so that it flags to open this door somewhere else on this planet or something like that. Rarely happens in this game. It's mostly your knowledge. And I think, like you said earlier, if you know what you're doing, you can beat this game in less than an hour for sure. I don't know if you can do it in one loop, but you can definitely do it real fast.
Oh, speaking of time loops, just going back to the Quantum Moon real quick, that is one of the sections where time completely stops.
And I'm glad it stops.
Yeah, because you're going to be that's probably one of the most heavy, we talked about it, heavy puzzle intensive areas or whatever that you'll be in.
And it's also a time where can you imagine if you got to that Nomai with
yes.
a minute and a half left? They want you to sit down and have this revelatory and incredible conversation with this Nomai, the thing you've been chasing the whole game, and then time runs out. That would have fucking sucked.
Undercut. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So very good decision for them to not have time pass. And you're standing on a quantum object and they say you've become quantum yourself. So whatever, time
sense.
Doesn't function there.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Yeah. It makes sense. Makes enough sense. So
yeah.
Let's talk about Dark Bramble. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're about there.
Yeah. I think this ending sequence to get to the eye is uncharacteristic for this game, to suddenly have to do this incredible sequence of events to get there. So you have to wait 5 minutes for the sand on the Ash Twin or the Ash to uncover this station. Then you have to run in, do the teleport trick, get in, grab the warp drive or whatever from the station there with all the masks, get in your ship, fly into Dark Bramble. And I love the concept of Dark Bramble, and it's a really scary place where space doesn't mean anything in there. Things are bigger than they should be. A real House of Leaves type situation going on in there.
Yeah, it's a very cosmic horror. It is this otherworldly thing that took over a planet and completely destroyed it, just decimated it.
Yeah. So I like that. And the anglerfish are interesting. Definitely scared the fuck out of me the first time one killed me. Like,
yeah,
extreme jump scare for me. But doing this last loop, so like, how many times did it take you to do this final sequence of events to get into the launch station?
The mothership inside Dark Bramble?
Yeah. Insert the warp core and get into the eye of the universe.
So, maybe 2 or 3 times. So the problem I had with it was once you get inside the ship and you have to, so the way you enter the coordinates into the ship,
yeah, is
you highlight, or you basically put your cursor over this little ball and you just have to move the ball around a track essentially and enter the coordinates.
Just how all know my technology works with the most fucking weird, like, you know, move a ball through a track when they're the most technologically advanced species that's ever lived.
That's how you open all their doors and stuff. Yeah. So that's how you enter the coordinates. It was frustrating for me because space doesn't exist inside Dark Bramble, so there's no gravity at all.
Right.
And so I'm really fighting with the gravity with my jets. I'm fighting the physics of moving that ball around. That was really frustrating. That was not a fun part because again, you're fighting with time. How long has it been? You know, since I left the Ash Twin project. You know, so that was the annoying thing. Getting there wasn't so bad because in a lot of ways I have already kind of been doing the same thing throughout the entire game. Like you take the the city on the Ember Twin, for instance, where you can only see most of that city for about 13 minutes before it's completely covered in sand, right? So at the beginning of a loop, I'm rushing to the Ember Twin as soon as possible. So it's same with, Brittle Hollow. Sometimes rushing to Brittle Hollow like right away. So there's already been numerous times where I've kind of just been doing these mini speed runs to certain areas because I know that if I don't get there soon enough, I'm going to miss some sort of vital information that I need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that it's timed is not really what gave me trouble. Like, one time I died while inputting the passwords, and that fucking sucked. But, like, that only happened one time. I died, no exaggeration, at least 30 times trying to get through Dark Bramble after picking up the key. Like, after picking up the warp drive. So 30 times I waited 5 minutes for that station to uncover, went in, got the key, got in my ship, flew to Dark Bramble, and died to the anglerfish. And this, even taking away some that's just me being impatient, because that's what that section is all about. Be patient. Don't touch your thrusters or whatever. You have to line up your stuff really well and then just coast for a long time. And I just could not figure out how to do that by myself. So I tried it about 10 times by myself, no guide. Because I was able to find the Know My Grave, they call it. I was able to find that by myself. But then getting to the mothership, as you said, let's say I died about 10 times by myself. Then I looked at a written guide for what to do. Died at least 5 or 10 more times. And I am mad. I am mad like doing this. Like, this fucking sucked. I think I texted you.
Yeah, you did.
As I'm prone to do, just saying like, hey, fuck Dark Bramble. Fuck this. And then I still couldn't do it. So I went and just watched someone do it on YouTube multiple times. Like, I would watch them, I would try it, I would die. Watch that video again, try it, and I would die. And finally I did it. and you're supposed to have this like wonderful like I just overcame this like horrible thing. Like fighting a difficult boss in a game that kills you a bunch of times. You're supposed to have this like, I overcame this. I feel victorious. And I didn't feel that. I was like, that fucking sucked. I hate this right now. Like, and then you go straight from that into this like really wonderful ending. But I was still like, my blood pressure was still up from how much I hated going through Dark Bramble, because you just have to be too perfect, I think. It was super frustrating. Doing it on the timer, too. Knowing that, like, you have enough time, I think, to get the thing. If you do really well, not like speedrunner well, but if you get the thing, get in your ship, fly to Dark Bramble, and go through the obstacle course at a good time. Not speedrunner stuff, but not like inching forward. You'll get to the ship with a couple minutes left, a couple minutes to orient yourself, find the room, put in the passwords, etc., etc. But time is ticking, and I died a couple times inside the ship, and then it would take me 10 more tries to get back to the ship. And yeah, I just fucking hate this. Like, in a game that was so wonderful up until this point, I fucking hate Dark Bramble. It was like the least fun thing by far about this game. Like, least fun, least rewarding, least, fuck it. I gotta stop.
Yeah, I think the inclusion of the anglerfish it's kind of a weird decision, because Dark Bramble's already pretty scary by itself. Especially when you have the signal scope out, you're searching for the right frequency, and all you hear is just this like ambient droning. It sounds it's haunting. It's haunting, and you can't see a damn thing in front of you. It's like flying through Silent Hill, All
right, so here's what it is. And I kind of got in my like emotions there for a second and forgot like what it is that's actually so frustrating about it is that when you die, it means when you die against the anglerfish, it means that there will be 10 real minutes before you can try again. Like, because you have to, or like, at least like 5 real minutes before you can try again, because you have to go do some other shit before you can get back into Dark Bramble and try again.
Okay, yeah.
Because you can fast forward time.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I started doing. But I don't, like, if they put a checkpoint at the beginning of Dark Bramble, that would be weird, in the scheme of how everything works.
Right.
And I wish that, I was going to say, I wish that they would just let you keep the warp core that you pull out, but by pulling that out, you stop the time loop. So that wouldn't make sense either. I think we're just kind of stuck with this section that I think sucks.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems with it at all. Honestly, even flying through Dark Bramble, I never, obviously I had problems with it the first time when I didn't know there's going to be fucking giant anglerfish in there.
Sure.
Which I think is just, again, I just kind of think it's a weird addition.
The section before you get to the ship, like the last anglerfish section, where they're just
right there,
shitload of them, and they're right there.
Yeah.
And it took me some time. The thing I saw in the YouTube video that really helped me was to just get out of the pilot's seat. Like, go into the thing with enough velocity so that the ship is going forward, and then just get out of the pilot's seat and just don't fucking touch anything until you can stop hearing the anglerfish, I think they said. I think is what actually worked. That was what unlocked it. I would not have thought of that by myself.
So, it's funny. We talked about, well, at least I said that the ship feels very cozy. And in a lot of like very messed up situations, that was kind of my like warm blanket to go to. So it sounds like I just kind of stumbled into that technique ass backwards, because I would be so freaked out by the anglerfish that I would leave the cockpit and just kind of hang out just hang out in the spaceship because it felt cozy. It felt familiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just one of those weird video game things that I did.
Well, I mean, it's cool if that's what you discovered.
Interesting. I didn't even know that was a valid technique. I don't, because it's not something I do all the time either. It's just, I have nothing else to do because I'm moving so slowly.
Right. Someone had the idea that like the key in the anglerfish thing is to just don't make any noise by using the thrusters. So get out of the seat so that even if you hit R2 on accident, you won't hit the thruster.
Yeah. I never had an issue because it's like when, you're flying through Dark Bramble on your first visit, like I said, you figure out there's absolutely no gravity. So before you even get into any of these little, multi-dimensional pockets, you just go full throttle, put your thrusters all the way up, and then right as you get to the entrance, just let off and just kind of coast.
Yeah. And it just took me a long time to figure out, when is it safe to touch the thrusters again? You have that threshold where like you have like the little pips that light up as the thrusters get stronger, like maybe 1 to 5. And you figure out like, I can use the thruster at level 1, but if it goes to level 2, then it's too loud. The anglerfish will see you. Mm-hmm. And it was always like, when is it safe to touch it again? Oh shit, I went up to level 2 on accident. Now I'm dead. It's going to be, several real-time minutes before I can come do this again.
If you are a real G, you can outrun the anglerfish if you get a certain distance away from them. Like, even if you're like still close enough that they'll get you, you're still able to outrun them. Your ship is faster than them.
There were a couple times where I could hear the anglerfish making the like, I'm gonna fucking eat you sound, and I was able to get into a portal on time. But yeah. Let's talk about that Know My Grave, though, before we get to the ending. This is one of my, I don't want to like favorite, because it's not like a fun discovery to make, but it's one of the most impactful kind of things to discover, I think. Following these Nomai that went into Dark Bramble, because they found that this was the best place to like, shoot out, try to find the Eye of the World, or the Eye of the Universe. The Eye of the World is Wheel of Time, book 1. The Eye of the Universe. So they crashed, and they're trying to like get through. They sent out like a probe to find a safe place, or to find the mothership, and they found it. But because of that thing where like, if you go through the portals, it can put you in 2 directions, right? They followed the wrong one, so they followed it to a very tiny portal that they couldn't fit through. And so by the time they got there, they were out of oxygen, and they all just died because they followed, you have 2 signals and they followed the wrong one. And that was, you just see all their bodies floating around it. And again, you should like the Nomai at this point, and you're kind of following them too, because they're leading you to your ultimate goal. And yeah, this was a really sad part of the game.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I was thinking though, and this is something I wanted to bring up earlier, just real quick. Did you break the space-time continuum?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Did you get an abrupt ending where you broke space-time with the black holes?
I don't think so, no.
So there's a secret ending that you can get, and it's when you discover one of the labs on I think it's on the Ember Twin, and they have a lab set up where the Nomai were first experimenting with the black hole and the white hole or whatever, and there's a probe there that they use to just kind of send back and forth. But if you manage to send the probe into, I think it's if you send, I forgot how it works because physics.
Right.
But if you manage to like create 2 different probes using the black holes, all of a sudden the entire, like, your entire screen will just, it's almost like somebody threw a rock at your flat screen almost. And the entire universe will collapse on itself, and then everything will just go black. You know, you hear your character die or whatever, because character has the sound design of them gasping or whatever. And the screen goes black, and then just a title will say, "You broke space-time." And that's it. That just boots you out to the title screen. It's
interesting.
Just start all over. It's fucking bizarre. You check it out on YouTube or whatever. It's very, very fucking bizarre.
Yeah, I'll have to go check that out. So the ending, I think we should get into the ending and then wrap this up. Really going through like the beat by beat of the ending, but like, you know, you solve the puzzle in the mothership, you shoot out the beacon, you are able to like get into the eye of the universe. Things get really spacey wacy, end of 2001, A Space Odyssey, like that for a second. Then you come out and you're in like this empty forest, and
I mean, the whole thing of going to the eye is, for me, was fucking horrific. At any moment, I was like, I would say it's more cosmic horror than Space 2001 Space Odyssey. It is something, again, it just goes to the art design and art direction of this game. It's just like, I'm not quite sure what's happening or what I'm looking at, but anyway, yeah, go ahead. What happens after you drop down through this one of many portals?
So you're at like the end of the universe, basically, right? So you're in like this forest, and you have that sequence where you have to follow the instruments and get your buddies, the other astronauts. Like you find their instrument, and then they appear at the campfire. And I don't know, it's kind of just like a trippy end sequence until you start gathering the instruments to get all the people. And I wasn't quite sure what was happening, which is cool because I just entered the eye of the universe. I mean, why would I know what to expect?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But you have one final song around the campfire with your buddies. Really fits into this, again, like the camping theme of the game and stuff like that. And you have the option to roast a marshmallow, a very like symbolic marshmallow at the end of the universe type of thing, right?
Yeah, I think the way the game ends is it's the polar opposite of everything we had experienced up until that very moment. Because, like we said, this solar system is incredibly hostile, right? And then you find out the Nomai kind of might be the bad guys. You go through this whole roller coaster of emotions, finding out what is actually going on. And then you find out like, oh no, the universe is dying. Like, this is it. Like, everything is coming to an end, and it should be stated, like, when you do enter the coordinates in the mothership in Dark Bramble, once you are teleported out of Dark Bramble, you are far enough away from the solar system that you see the sun go supernova one last time. You see your solar system die.
Right.
But this time you've survived. And then you go through the whole, after you see that, you go through the whole emotional coaster of the eye, and then you are going through this bizarre scene, like you said, through the woods, finding your friends that you've met throughout the game to do this song one last time. And, the Nomai that you meet on the Quantum Moon is there.
Right.
And is just basically being like, yeah, no, this is it. This is the end, and we're all here to observe the end. But hey, look, all this other stuff is happening. All this, all this other life is beginning, and we're going to be here to watch it. And
that's, from what I read, I think that's not always the ending. It's whether or not you found the Nomai that determines whether you see life beginning again at the end.
And furthermore, there's another different ending if you have the DLC.
Oh, right.
But you have to play it in a specific way. I did not get that ending because I played the vanilla game again before I played the DLC. So I played it, flip-flopped it. So
gotcha. So I like the kind of symbolic, like I think you said earlier, like the universe doesn't care about you really at all. You're pretty insignificant. All you're really doing here is learning about what's going on. You're not changing the fate of the universe here. You're just kind of, you fast forwarded in time until the end of the universe. So the universe is ending. There's nothing you can do about it, but you're here with all the, the people you met, including the Nomai. You have that final song together. You sing, you sing the song. Everyone plays the song. You roast a marshmallow at the end of the world. Kind of one nice final moment. Then you see the world end, and you kind of get that hope for the future. And like this ending is a little bit more, well, it's more optimistic than my own personal beliefs, but I thought it was a nice ending after basically a whole game of just finding depressing revelations about what have happened to the people you've been kind of following. And then you get this hopeful thing at the end. It's kind of like the ending is suggesting that life will be better for the next, set of beings in the universe, which is not something I personally believe at this point in my life, not as like a given thing. It's kind of presented in this game as like it will be better. But it is a nice ending for sure.
Yeah, I'll say as somebody who's I'm very cynical. Yeah, I don't know. I love the idea of things being better once I'm gone, Am I certain of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know, and I think that's a deeper conversation for another podcast, but I really enjoyed this ending a lot. And like I said, it hit me, at the right time in my life. Mm-hmm. And it's not, we keep talking about how indie games and their writing can be really fucking heavy-handed, and they're really trying to nail you over the head with their themes. And this game doesn't do that. There's not even really a hint of positivity in this game at all up until the very end, I don't think it's corny or terribly presented like a lot of other indie games.
No, I think it's presented well because what we just talked about, like that idea that things will be better for those that come after you, the game doesn't tell you that. Like it's not really a character that just straight up says that. You kind of get that feeling at the end when you see I think it's even just a picture of new life on a planet. And so you think you just watched the end of everything, and then it turns out that's not necessarily the case. And that gives you a little just hopeful note to end the game on.
Yeah, and the music, it is a sensory overload, that ending with the music that's playing and
that song that plays. Yeah.
Yes, it's so incredible. And yeah, I think Outer Wilds really sticks its landing. And that final image that you get of the new life and the planets being formed, it's my desktop image at work. So it's really an incredible image.
It is.
Yeah.
All that being said, I was still mad from spending literally multiple hours trying to get through Dark Bramble. So that like when I watched this, I saw it and I appreciated it for what it was, but I'm imagining a different scenario where I didn't literally spend multiple days of playing this game trying to get through Dark Bramble, where this ending would have really like rocked me emotionally.
We had such opposite experiences with this game.
As it stands, I got to the ending and I saw it and I appreciated it, and it was a nice kind of moment definitely like the campfire scene was a nice moment, but I was only 20 minutes removed from finally beating the thing that caused like just a ton of frustration. So like I feel like it didn't hit as hard as it did for most other people, for me personally. Not to say that I wasn't able to appreciate it, and I've had some time to think about it since then. And the frustration from Dark Bramble gets less and less because I'm not currently doing it. And then the appreciation for the ending grows as I think about it some more, even if it doesn't perfectly line up with my beliefs.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is Outer Wilds. And man, we could go for like an hour more talking about just interesting things that happened on the planets.
I have like notes on here where it's like, hey, what's some like really crazy stuff that happened to you? And yeah.
Well, I mean, I talked about my ship falling in the black hole while I was exploring. The only way I knew it was like I started to see the ship marker on the screen start to fall, and I was like, oh no. So I turned around real fast and just helplessly watched it fall into the black hole. That was cool. I got sucked up by the the sand vacuum on the Ash Twin a couple of times.
Sure.
And that was like, wait, no.
I think I talked about actually most of these. The only two I didn't mention were DLC things. You got to play the DLC, man.
Yeah,
I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say about that.
Yeah, once I kind of get the courage to play something that I know is going to be scary, I'll play it for sure. I like this game enough that I will.
They have an option in there to turn scary off.
Do they?
They do, which was like, that was whenever I started any game, I always just go into the options right away, and I saw that.
Sure.
And I had no knowledge that the game was supposed to be scary, and I was like, what the fuck does this mean?
Yeah.
So then from then on, I had sweaty palms the entire way. And that's all I'll say.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I guess just as a closing thing, like this game is interesting enough, and I do trust the developers enough with like kind of their vision for what this Outer Wilds thing, what they want it to be, is great. So like the DLC is definitely it's on my wish list and stuff like that. I just need to be in the mood to play more of this, and also be in the mood for something potentially scary.
Yeah.
I
don't often think of like, when I think of my greatest games of all time, like my favorite games of all time, rather, like putting a list together, I don't often think of that because it's almost an impossible task. But Outer Wilds, like without a thought, would be on that list for me at some point. So
yeah, it's, even if it's not on my like favorite games of all time, because I did have some notable frustrations that I've mentioned. It's, if you just think about it as a game, what it tried to accomplish and its like success rate in accomplishing that, I think it's like an absolute home run of a game for sure. Just, I had some frustrating experiences, but yeah,
sure.
Definitely great. So thanks for coming on the show, dude. It's been a blast talking about Outer Wilds. Yeah, of course. You're welcome back anytime, man. Thank you everybody for listening. Stay tuned for the next game that comes out of the backlog.